Welcome to The View from the Summit, conversations with the world's top trainers, handlers, and athletes in the equestrian and canine sports. Brought to you by Summit Animal Health. Welcome, everybody, to View from the Summit. We have a wonderful international show for you today. But first, I would like to introduce my co-host, Robin Benson. Robin has spent so much time in the saddle, from fox hunting to 3-day eventing to barrels and now she owns with her husband a working cattle ranch and spends tons of time in the cattle chasing the doggies through the woods. Hello, Robin.
Hey, Steve, how are you? It's great to be here.
I am great. And now I get to introduce our guest. And the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to read just some headlines from the last 3, 4, 5 months. Here we go. One headline: Cathleen Driscoll dominates. Kathleen Driscoll and Magnolia are magnificent. Kathleen Driscoll and Flotilla fly to the 3rd FEI. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here.
Wow, what a year you're having. And you're coming to us from where? Tell us where you are.
So I'm in Annecy, France currently. I'm doing a little tour abroad, shopping for some horses, trying to look for the next superstars for the future.
Yeah. Well, tell me, I know a lot of people on Robin shops for horses. I've never shopped. Well, I did shop for a horse once and ended up buying a donkey, but that's a whole nother story. Tell me, when you shop for a horse like this, what do you do? What's the process? What are you looking for?
So finding horses for the top sport, it's a real process. It's difficult to find these top prospects. So we travel around. Over the last few days, we've been in France, Belgium, Holland, Switzerland. We're looking for young horses currently, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, just trying to find horses with quality that we think we can develop for the top sport. As I said, it's a bit of a process. I've probably sat on 30 horses in the last few days. But it's a very fun experience, and it's great to travel to these different places and try these different horses. And we found a couple of good ones that we're hoping, to bring back with us and develop for the upper levels of the sport. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's really just about, trying to, in a short amount of time, find a horse that you have a good feel with, one that you think has the potential for these bigger classes.
Do you jump them? Do you trot them around? I mean, what do you do? I know if you buy a car, you kick the tires. So do you poke a hoof, or what do you do?
Oh, it's a little bit of everything. You start looking at the horses on the ground, looking at their conformation. For a lot of these horses, we ask about the breeding, what their upbringing was. We look at their records, what shows they've been competing at, what classes they've been in. And then the trial period involves, yes, riding them, jumping them. If it's a horse we really like, we might go back a second time, sit on them again, jump a different course. For each horse, we might do something a little bit different, jump a combination, jump a bigger course, a couple bigger jumps, see what they feel like. It's a lot of assessing the whole horse in a short amount of time.
So does it come down basically to a gut feeling, or do you have a list of check marks, plus and minuses, an actual document, or is it just gut?
So that's a good question. Really, it's a little bit of both. Going into this, the horses that we find them off of a checklist, as you would say. It's horses that we've watched the videos, we've looked at their records. They're horses that we think will be good horses, but then in that moment, in those 20 or 30 minutes when you're riding the horse and trying the horse, that comes down to a lot of feel and a little bit of a gut feeling, as you said. If you think that this is a horse that over the next year, or 2 years, 6 months, depending on it, that you can develop into something better, into something that'll fit into our program. All of these horses are good horses. And I really believe every horse has a job in its life. So we're finding the horses that fit into our program and our career.
So Kathleen, are you shopping for horses for yourself, or are you looking for client horses, for student horses, or a whole bunch of different kinds of horses?
Yeah, the latter, a little bit of everything. I'm looking for horses for myself that I think can jump the bigger classes going forward. And then we're also shopping for some clients. As I said, we're here with Don Stewart, who's probably one of the biggest hunter and equitation trainers in the country. So we're looking for some horses for him, for hunters and equitation, clients in France, clients in the US. It's kind of a fact-finding mission. As I said, finding horses that fit for us, and then horses that maybe don't work in our program, but that we say, hey, I think I might know someone. I have a friend. I have a connection. This would be a good horse for another program, and just helping put these horses down the avenues that will find them the most success.
So you're looking for jumpers and hunters and equitation horses,
And
all
equitation, yeah, all at once. We go into these barns and we say, okay, just pull them all out. Let's see them all.
Let's see what you
maybe
got.
it'll fit one of our needs.
So do you speak French or German or any other language?
So I speak Spanish the most. That would be, if I had to pick a second language, it would be Spanish. I can get by a little bit in French. I can understand more than I can speak. It's probably not as good as it should be, given that I work for a French trainer. That's something I need to work on going forward.
Yeah, that would be a good political move, right?
It would be good. All the time, Katie and Henry, they say, "Oh, how's your French?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's coming." Oh, yeah.
That's great.
That's-
So that when you talk, I mean, we can talk about other things because you've had an absolutely amazing year. But while we're talking about horses and shopping overseas, after you pick out the horses that you want to bring home with you, what happens? Like, is there a quarantine period? What does it look like now flying them home? Obviously, they're going on a plane, not a boat, right?
And
Yes.
when you fly them over, do they fly business class?
I don't know if it's business class, but let me tell you, these horses, they live the life. They have the royal treatment the whole way through. They live a better life than we do most of the time. So these horses that we find, initially they'll go through a vetting process. So it's a little bit like a fact-finding mission. We go through and see what ailments they have, if it's things that need management, if it's something that we think will affect them in their career going forward. Assuming they pass that, initial vet check, then we go into the shipping process. So our horses typically fly out of either Liège in Belgium or from Amsterdam. So we'll ship them to those airports. The horses fly nowadays. It's the most practical way to transport horses. So they'll fly into JFK, where they have a quarantine process. For the geldings, it's the simplest of the options. It's just a 3-day quarantine where they check for any communicable diseases. Assuming those are negative, which they should be because we test them ahead of time, then they will ship to wherever we need them to go, whether it's our home base in Virginia or if they meet us at a horse show. The process for mares and stallions is a little bit more complicated. They have a longer quarantine period where they test for breeding diseases. For the mares, that's a 4-week quarantine process. The stallions is a 6-week process. So those horses have to go to approved quarantine facilities in the United States, where they will complete that process before they come to us.
Wow, what a process indeed.
It is.
So from the time you buy a horse to the time you get it over in the US, how long is that?
So it depends, right? For a gelding, it could be a matter of 6 to 8 days. For a mare or a stallion, you're looking at 1 to 2 months, essentially.
And then they have to learn English so that you can communicate with them, right?
Yeah, they have to learn to communicate, and it's always a bit of a transition period going from the European system to the American system. These horses, they have to learn a whole new lifestyle. the feeding program changes, their lifestyle changes, their riders are different. You know,
Wait a
our
minute, you said what's the difference between the US style and the European style? Just give us a couple of big differences.
Yeah, so the European style, you know, the young horses, I'm speaking of young horses because that's what we're predominantly shopping for at the moment. The young horses here are brought up very differently from in the US. So in Europe, they're typically turned out until they're 3 or 4 years old, just completely turned out in the field. And they're brought up slower. So when you get a horse in Europe that's 5 or 6 years old, it will have a lot less handling experience, a lot less riding experience than the young horses in America. So when we bring these horses over to the US, their training might be a little bit behind those that you would find in America. You know, their flat work isn't quite as developed. So a lot of it is in the training and transitioning them over to this different program. And the riding styles are different as well. You know, the European riders are a little bit of a deeper seat, more in the hand, where in America we ride them a little bit lighter, a little bit more out of the contact. And that's a big transition for a lot of these horses, you know, and it takes them a couple months for them to become comfortable with a different riding program and these different riders. So for sure, you can't expect a horse when you buy it to be at its best the moment it gets off the plane. You know, it takes a little bit. And also actually something that we found a lot is the weather. You know, the weather is quite a bit different in the US than it is in Europe. It's a colder climate here. So when we ship the horses over, they need to become adjusted to the heat and the humidity, especially if they come in the summer. So that's a factor that we take into consideration when we bring these horses over, giving them time to adjust physically.
So much of what you do, I mean, once you get the horses here, you're competing at a really high level, and you've had a really strong season this year. As Steve mentioned when we first brought you on, and congratulations, by the way. But some of that has to include traveling, right? You have big shows, big competitions all over. You're not just competing in your backyard. So some of the transitioning and what are some tips that you have, or what are some things you do to maintain the performance, maintain the excellence with your horses as you travel to these big shows? And obviously this year, you know, you're definitely on top of your game, so you've got it figured out.
Yeah. So our horses at this level, they travel a lot. Frequently, our competitions are a minimum of 6 hours away, upwards of 20 hours of travel time for these horses. And travel can be quite difficult on the horses. So there's a couple of factors that we can take into consideration when we're going to these events. One of the big ones is just the timing. You always have to account for the wear and tear that the travel will have on the horses. So we try to arrive at the venues a minimum of 4 to 6 days before they're expected to compete, to allow them to rest and recover before we ask them for their, you know, maximum exertion. Another thing, as I was talking about, is the weather. So frequently, if we're traveling in the summer, we will ship our horses overnight to try and keep them out of the heat. If we're traveling to some place where the temperature is warmer, we ship them late at night or early in the morning, so that temperature difference isn't so damaging to their systems. You know, the shipping and heat is quite difficult on horses, keeping them hydrated, keeping them well fed. And then also, you know, with Summit, we like to always give our horses a dose of Summit before they ship, because I remember reading a quote once, and it said that when horses travel, every hour they're on a trailer is equivalent to an hour of trail riding. So when we're shipping these horses and they're shipping for 16 or 18 hours, that's the equivalent of having your horse out for an 18-hour trail ride, which is quite, you know, asking for quite an exertion on them. You know, so we like to give them a shot of Summit before they travel to help ease that process on them and give them the best chance to be able to feel their best getting off the trailer, and then be able to give their best later in the week when we're asking them to perform.
That's a great point and a great nugget for all of our listeners who are riding in any discipline, right? There's a lot, we have a lot of listeners and fans who compete in many different disciplines, but a lot of people that do travel quite a bit. And that one, I haven't ever heard that before, but it really makes a lot of sense. And it's a great way of framing it, right? Because
Yeah.
an hour on the trailer, they're trying to stabilize and
Yeah, they
balance.
have to balance themselves, and they're mentally really having to focus on the process of keeping themselves in line, and focusing on the travel. So it is quite a tiring process for them. It's something that you wouldn't think about necessarily, because you say, oh, they're standing on a trailer, it's not that difficult. But it actually is a tiring process for them.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And that the summit helps them recover. That's really, really interesting to, think about for every, and so you give it before and not after so that they're preemptively
Yeah, we
ready.
try. Yeah, in a lot of the things I do, I found the most success in being preemptive rather than behind the curve. We try and stay ahead of these issues, so that we don't face the issue head on. We can kind of address it before it becomes a real problem.
That's really, really wise advice right there. And we've talked to a few other people on this podcast who travel for with their horses for what they do. But what are your tips? There's a lot of people listening. I know I'm soaking it up too for our horses, but when they travel, what are some other things you do as a general rule to help your horses be more comfortable and be more ready to perform and adjust more quickly when they get to their destination while they're on the trailer, while they're traveling?
Yeah, so a couple other things we do that are standard practice in our program. So any sort of long trip that we're traveling on, we give the horses a GastroGuard or an ulcer guard before they ship, just to manage those stomach acid levels, to prevent any little pop-ups of ulcers or something that might develop from the stress of traveling. Also, good tips that we follow all the time. We make sure the horses always have hay and water in front of them when they're shipping. The worst thing you want to do is arrive at a horse show and have your horse be dehydrated. That can be a big issue when traveling. So always make sure they have hay and water. I ship some of the horses personally myself. I drive the 4-horse trailer with a couple. So I stop every 3 to 4 hours and just check on them, check to make sure they're drinking, to make sure they're eating, to make sure they're pooping, that everything looks good. Managing the air temperature in the trailer as well, that it's not too hot or too cold. And then on the back side of it, once you get to these events, along the same lines, having a very well bedded stall, because your horse is probably going to want to lay down after a long travel. Having water, having hay, having a fan if it's hot weather, so that they can cool down. We manage their temperatures. We check their temperatures upon arrival as well as 12 hours later, just to make sure that they're not developing any sort of shipping fever. And then I also personally like to get my horses out for hand walks once they get off the trailer. All that standing still, it's great for them to be able to go out and move around a little bit and stretch, so that they're not going in their stalls and getting stiff after that traveling.
Super. So in the trailer itself, do you bed the trailer? Do you use soft ride boots? Do you have thick rubber mats? Or do you use shipping boots? Any of those sorts of things while you're traveling?
Yeah, so that's we ship on shavings personally, unless we have a horse that needs to ship on straw, which does happen occasionally. If we have a horse that's particularly ulcery, we will ship them on straw. We find that if they eat the straw, it helps manage their stomach acid content, and that can help prevent ulcers as well. So shavings are straw. And then our trailers are all matted. Some of our horses we will ship in a box stall. If we feel that they need to put their heads down, if we have a horse that might have neck issues or airway issues, it's very beneficial for them to be able to put their head and neck down while they're shipping. So that's something we take into consideration. And then as well, our horses ship in wraps. We have the European wraps, which some people might not be familiar with. They extend from the knee all the way down to the hoof. So they're providing a little bit of support through the fetlock and the pastern, but then as well, they're helping to prevent any, overreach injuries, if the horse were to have to shuffle a little bit to manage its balance, it's a nice layer of protection so that we don't have any injuries upon arrival.
Nice. Awesome.
Wow.
That's just getting there, right?
That's-
But then once you're there and do all the
Yeah.
rest of the stuff, then go into the winner's circle. And
Yeah.
I mean, this is where the real magic happens, right? So you do the performance.
Talk about special delivery. I mean, that your horses are special delivery.
Right.
Man.
Exactly. But this year has been, I mean, you've had a lot of great years, but do you feel like this year you've changed anything, or is it just a culmination of a bunch of things coming together finally? Or what do you think has made this year such a standout year for you?
Well, I feel like I'm still developing in my career. I'm very fortunate to be where I'm at, and I've had a lot of success early on. But I was thinking about this the other day. I just jumped my first FEI competition 2 years ago, and it was this summer in Michigan, 2 years. So I'm relatively new to this higher level of sport. So I feel like over the last 2 years, and even thinking about it from month to month, I've really developed a lot as a rider. And I feel like coming into this year and this summer in particular, I've developed a higher level of skill. I have a better relationship with my horses. These are horses that I've had in my program for 1 to 2 years now, depending on the horse. So I really just felt very prepared coming into this summer, feeling like I've learned a lot more. I've got another 12 months of experience under my belt. And this was definitely hands down the best summer I've had. I had some great wins as well as some great consistent results, always being in the placings. And I think that's a telltale factor in a rider's performance, is not just
You're good. You're good.
okay.
Whoop.
Not just having one result, but being able to consistently jump clear rounds and produce good results. So I really think it's a culmination over the couple of years. I've been based with my trainers, with Katie and Henri, for about 4.5 years now, and I really owe all my success to them. They've just been amazing in developing me as a rider and developing these horses with me and giving me the tools to be successful in the ring. And it's a great feeling, when you can start getting the results and seeing all of the hard work pay off. So I'm extremely grateful, and I'm so excited, looking forward to our fall season and what's to come.
Well, I just wanted to point out that all this success didn't happen until you and I talked last January. I mean, I just want to point that out. We talked, and then boom, things started happening for you. But okay, just forget me. You did tell me a story when we talked in January about you had an angry horse, horse that just was angry, and you gave it Summit. And can you retell that story, because it's a really fun Summit story, and it's just a fun story about figuring out why a horse is angry and disagreeable.
Yeah. So we when we get these horses into our program, we like to look at them with a clean slate. Oftentimes when we bring a horse in, we will have some background information, the program they're coming from, what they're eating, what's been done to them physically, as far as vet work and body work. But we like to look at them with a clean slate and, see if there's anything that we can do to help them going forward. So yeah, we had a horse that came into our program that was a little bit irritated and, just not quite with me as a rider. You want to feel that your horse is with you and on the same page. And I just wasn't quite getting that feeling. So we started that horse on Summit, and within a couple weeks, the horse became so much more comfortable within their own body, that then I was able to develop a better relationship with them, a better feel, start building that partnership that you need to get to the upper levels of the sport. And it's such a great feeling, to be able to bring a horse along in that way and see the changes that come about, and the way that they, they start to become one with you. And then those results start coming in the ring. And that's the best feeling.
Yeah. And it was all that not coming, or that anger issue, was due to some hurt someplace that a veterinarian couldn't tell you about, but the horse could.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, Robin, we've got to wrap this up. We could just keep going and going. She's one of my favorite people to interview, because she's so knowledgeable, and she just shares so well. So do you have any parting questions, Robin?
I agree, Steve. It's so much fun to visit with you, Kathleen, and thank you for taking this time. Just one quick thing. It really hit me. You're, like you said, you're still growing in your sport, and it's wonderful to hear you speak about the process that it has taken to get to where you are, and that you're not done yet. You're still,
Yeah.
you have a lot left to do. But just one quick, parting word. What would you share with people who are sort of at any level, who are working hard and feel like, man, I'm never going to get there? Because some days we're riding our horses and we're just like, is this ever going to come together? Because
Yeah.
you know how it is, right? So just what are, a parting nugget that you could share with people of encouragement, because you have arrived at a level, not done yet, but congratulations for persevering.
So one of my favorite bits of wisdom, as you say, because it's something I think about in terms of my own career as I think back on it, is to trust the process and have faith in where you're going. I'm 30 years old now, so I started competing and at these upper levels of show jumping when I was 28. And at the time, I'm 28 and I'm thinking, oh, I'm so far behind everyone. There's 18-year-olds that are jumping Grand Prix, and I'm 10 years behind the curve. But as I keep developing as a rider, and I think back on what I've done so far, I had a different path that brought me here. I have backgrounds in eventing and dressage and hunters and equitation, and I've worked as a groom and a barn manager, and I've shipped horses, and I worked at an Amazon warehouse to pay the bills on time. I have a whole diversity behind me that's allowed me to get where I am today. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen in the same way that someone else's career might happen. So it's important to not get discouraged by what other riders are doing. You can't compare yourself to everyone else and say, oh, well, it's such a shame, this rider's already jumping Grand Prix, or they're already jumping international competitions, and I'm still in my backyard. It's okay. It takes time, and I'm extremely grateful for all of the experiences that I've had, because they have all allowed me to become the horsewoman that I am today. I wouldn't have these experiences if I had, just been given a good horse when I was 16 years old. Working with the thoroughbreds off the track, those are the ones that, taught me about restarting a horse, and working with the dressage riders gave me flat work skills, and it all comes together. So I think it's really important to have faith in the process and believe in what you're doing, and have passion for the horses, and let time take its toll. It's important. Time is a good thing. It's not always against you.
That's why. Such great wisdom. Thank you so much, Kathleen. And lastly, if people want to connect with you on social media, on a website, where do people find you if they want to follow your success?
So Instagram is probably my most active platform. It's Cathleen.Driscoll on Instagram. Pretty easy to find, and I'm very willing to answer any questions. If anyone wants to message me, I'm more than willing.
Wow, I'm sure you're going to have some people take you up on that. Kathleen, as always, it's just a hoot to be with you and to talk with you, and a real thrill that we got to talk to you from France when you're shopping some big time horses. You'll have to come back and give us a report on what you got and how they're developing in a few months. Can you do that for us?
I'm sure when I talk to you next time, I'll let you know about all the new horses in our program and how it's going.
I look forward to it. Robin, it's been fun, kiddo.
Absolutely. Likewise. And thank you, Kathleen. And if you're listening or watching, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Every Wednesday, we drop a new inspirational and packed full of nuggets episode. So thanks, Steve. Thanks,
Thank
Kathleen.
you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
That's
you
our
for having
view
me.
from the summit. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for A View from the Summit. This program is made possible by Summit Animal Health. Check them out online at summitanimals.com. Thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you next week for another View from the Summit.